All right, hello everyone. It's Spicysushi. So another league start means another league starter compendium. This one is a little bit different from usual since we basically got an entire endgame revamp. T17s are no longer like the pinnacle mapping endgame. So we're actually back to a pretty even playing field where you can really have a lot of flexibility in what you want to play. Obviously, you should always do what you find fun because that's what's important, but let's be real, it really wasn't fun to do a T17 Fortress with like 5 million DPS. So now that mostly everything is going to be T16 focused, I think every build is really in A to B range this time. Last league in Keepers, I decided to rank builds based on how I think they would perform in the league mechanic. This was back when I assumed that breach monsters might actually be a little bit difficult, like tanky or do a lot of damage, but they ended up being just a massive pushover, so these rankings were pretty arbitrary. This time with Mirage, it's a little bit more complicated because it really is a build your own league mechanic, since the way Mirage works is it'll basically dupe whatever you're doing. So instead of just one big boom expedition encounter, you'll actually get two in your map, and instead of just one legion in a certain part, you'll get two of that legion. With this in mind, I decided to rank starters in a pretty simple way this time and also provide like 1 to 2 league mechanics that I think a particular build will excel at. For example, a build with really solid explosions or, poison, proliferation, etc. will be a solid choice for Big Boom Expedition, while a build like Lightning Arrow is obviously going to be a top-tier choice for Legion or Breach. So some general guidelines is anything in A tier does roughly like 5 million plus DPS on a very low budget. It's not going to take a lot of gear to get to that level, and it's not going to be completely made of paper and just fall over. A solid build overall. Now, builds in B plus tier are not really much behind that. Like, they're going to be able to get 5 mil, obviously, but it may take a little bit more than just, some rares equipped. You might need a sizable budget, and builds lower than that are going to struggle to reach 5 mil, but are still going to be playable and viable. So, pretty simple this time. Usually I would rank like defense, well-roundedness into the sheet, but we have a really different in-game landscape this time. It's the first change since Necropolis, really. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. So, by far the most popular league starter, it looks like so far, it's going to be Kinetic, Fusillade, Ballista, Hierophant / Champion. Now, what is a Path of Exile league start without Palstron playing some kind of Ballista build? And I'm actually kind of a Ballista enjoyer myself. I've played Palstron's Explosive Arrow Ballista for many leagues, and that was way clunkier than KF, but it was still a very chill play style that I do enjoy a lot. Typically with KF, you have to build potentially multiple uniques with less duration, but since Totems have a built-in less attack speed multiplier, you really only need a warped timepiece, and the rest of your build can be just life and res rares. Also, now that totem placement speed scales your emerge speed, totems should feel a lot more responsive and faster. Instead of placing your ballistas then running to the next pack while waiting for the next pack to die, you should be seeing packs die almost immediately now. And the reason I've got KF on the top of my list is because it's probably the most well-rounded starter for this league. I will say, if you want to focus on mechanics like Legion, Bossing, Expedition, I would definitely look at other builds that excel in those mechanics, but if you're looking for like a super easy 4-stone and a chill build solid at a variety of league mechanics, this is definitely one of your best options. I will say it's not going to be super tanky, but most starters on this list aren't, since it's not like you have to do T17s anymore to make a lot of currency. You can focus on exactly what you want. And this build is going to be able to push 10 to 20 million DPS very early on, and it's going to feel really durable at the same time. Now, Lightning Arrow and Kinetic Blast Deadeye. As usual, there's not really much to say here. If you're following a Fub Gun build, you are looking to be blasting maps, specifically with Legion and probably some Breach this time. There really aren't any other starters that can compete with these builds for Legion, and since Legion is probably going to be really solid again this league, since it'll be a primary source of early 6 links in the league, these starters are going to be really popular. You get decent DPS, low survivability, but absolutely insane clear speed. Not much else to say. Ele Hit Slayer. So Elemental Hit is basically the result of every strike skill being nerfed out of existence or just plain horrible on a budget. So the last bastion for strikes is now Elemental Hit. Slayer is just an incredible ascendancy for league start. You get solid max hit from Fortify and Endurance charges, and the best recovery in the game by far for league starters with Overleech. Slayer is by far my favorite ascendancy in the game. If you've never played one, you definitely should at some point. And I'm really hoping the new static strike of Gathering Lightning is overpowered so we can see a return to the Golden Age. But Ele Hit is still decent and it is a solid option. Just make sure that you watch some 2-stone runs on YouTube so you know what you're getting into, because it's definitely not Lightning Strike. Now, Smite or Lightning Strike of Arcing are both solid pivots once you have a larger budget, but if you're wanting to go into the league with strikes, Elemental Hit is probably the best option that we have right now, unless Static Strike ends up being insane. Poison Concoction of Bouncing still looks solid and a good transition into Poison Mamba. We thought Mamba was completely dead, but looks like they reverted some of the nerfs, at least for Poison, so it does still look viable. Now, I'm not sure who's going to come out with a build guide this league. I'm pretty sure Crouching Tuna did it last league, so we'll see. It may be a Russian guide, but I will link it in the sheet when it is available. Archmage Hierophant. Now, this build is in an interesting spot since the build was B tier, I'd say, going into Settlers, but it skyrocketed straight to the top of A tier because of Foulborn uniques. And if these uniques are still accessible for cheap, then it'll definitely maintain its A tier place. You can pretty easily reach 10 to 12 mil DPS on a budget while having like 10k mana and 4 to 5k life on like 3 divines or less. So that's pretty insane. With those numbers, how is this build not an S tier? Well, it's because the build is extremely clunky. As someone who's played this build for like 5 leagues in a row, I can tell you with great power comes insane amounts of clunkiness. Your defense and your damage revolve around an automated guard skill called Arcane Cloak. Your mapping is pretty mediocre after 4 stones unless you can somehow get your hands on like an Explode Barracks Foulborn, which is why my plan is probably to swap to Kinetic Blast of Clustering after bossing if I do end up starting Archmage again. There is a new cooldown recovery support, which when paired with a Runegraft of the Warp, will allow us to reach like 80 to 85% uptime on Arcane Cloak, but I have no idea how expensive it's going to be, and so I really can't consider that. You know, it's still going to be extremely strong and a solid choice as long as you know what you're getting into. The new Shock Nova looks really fun, despite the damage looking a little bit poor, but we will see how that goes. Now, Slams. Slams used to be the only S-tier league starter last league, in my opinion, and I think that maintained to be true as Keepers went on. But now, after the nerfs, I think it's in a well-deserved A-tier state. In Settlers, this was definitely the fastest build to reach like 10 million DPS. After the nerfs, it'll probably be comparable power to other A-tier builds. Obviously, you can't make a 1k PDPS axe easily anymore. It's going to be a lot harder with the tree nerfed, but it's not like that was why the build was S-tier. It is really good on its own. Bleed Slams specifically look actually really strong with the new Bloodline that gives you skills from equipped main hand weapon are supported by level 1 Cruelty. This is basically going to be like 40% more damage and mandatory on all Bleed builds, so a massive buff for Bleed Slams, and I think FaZe Plays will definitely have his updated guide soon. At the end of the day, War Cries are still insanely strong, so even if there is like a 30% or so damage nerf on the build, it is going to be a solid starter if you enjoy slams, especially if you're an SSF or hardcore SSF. Alright, Necromancer Kinetic Blast of Clustering. This was Jung Rowan's league starter in Settlers League, and it proved to be one of the top starters in the game. It has been nerfed quite a bit though, but I do believe it is still going to be viable because there's a lot of people excited for it, and I believe Crouching Tuna is actually starting at this league. Even before going Chaos Inoculation, the build had really solid defense and damage. You got block cap through Bone Offering with Necromancer, and then the buff to Corpse Pact ramp time last patch made this a really smooth and fast starter. After the nerfs, you will definitely need a sizable budget, I think, for the starter, especially since your massive power spikes came from like a Whispers of Infinity amulet. But if you are looking for a build that has good speed, really good map clear that rivals even Deadeye, and then solid durability, this is definitely one of the best starters if it's still viable, which I do believe it will be. People are really excited for this build, and even if Jung doesn't plan on updating it, I believe, like I said, Crouching Tuna is going to be league starting it, so there should be a guide out that you can look forward to. If you are a newer player and just looking for a chill and satisfying build to play, I think Garotha's Bleed, Lacerate, Retaliate, / Retaliate Gladiator has been updated for 3.28, and as usual, it looks extremely solid as a comfortable league starter. The bleed pops are very satisfying. The tankiness is on another level compared to every other starter on this list because of Gladiator's insane avoidance. And the damage, while taking a sizable budget to reach like 5 mil DPS, you can still scale it to 10, 20, 30 million with typical power spikes like clusters, Ryslotha's Coil, a rare weapon, etc. And speaking of new player builds, Righteous Fire is also always a top tier option. It hasn't received any significant nerfs and should still be a solid option, especially since T16 strategies are probably where most people are going to be sitting the entirety of this league. Alright, in terms of minions, I am not a minion player, but I do obviously have minion builds on the sheet. There are some new minion bloodlines which look pretty interesting. Unfortunately, as of recording this video though, Gazi, Helmbreaker, and Baylor Mage don't have updated guides out, but as always, I will add them to the sheet as they are updated, so you can look forward to that. All the builds on the sheet are going to have their build guides linked and the creator linked to their Twitch, etc. So bookmark the sheet and keep an eye on updates. It will be updated all the way up until league start. Now, what am I league starting? I have no idea. Mapping looks really fun this league, so I feel like I'm going to miss out if I don't play a mapper. I usually like to do bossing, and bossing does look pretty interesting this league since nightmare maps are bossing content now. That they're not like, the prices aren't going to be controlled by mappers, so, doing some boss rushing and nightmare maps, farming my own uber fragments does sound fun, but also I'm going to miss out on the league mechanic if I do that, so we'll have to see. I am looking at everything right now. I do like Slayer Ele Hit, KF Totems, and, Archmage, so we'll see. I will have an update closer to launch as usual, but I will see you then.